Like, comment, and subscribe, because some stories are too dangerous to stay buried. Inside ADX Florence, the most locked-down prison in America, there is a saying whispered only in the dark, only when the cameras can't see. The walls may hold the men, but the men hold the power. This is a story they never want the world to hear. The story of how gangs, cut off from sunlight, human contact, and the outside world, still control entire networks from behind a steel door. In most prisons, a man can whisper. In ADX, even a whisper is a risk. The cells are sealed. The air barely moves. The doors weigh hundreds of pounds. The lights never fully go off. Every breath echoes. Every sound is monitored. But power, real power, finds a way. For years, the outside world believed ADX Florence was escape-proof, break-proof, and gang-proof. A place where the most dangerous men were silenced forever. A place where communication dies, where violence is impossible, and where influence stops at the concrete. They were wrong. Deep inside these concrete tombs, far beneath the clean government reports and polished press releases, gangs learned how to adapt. They learned how to run orders through steel doors, how to pass messages through ventilation systems, how to turn routine sick calls into strategy meetings, and how to build loyalty through hunger, pain, and memory. This is not a story about riots or chaos. ADX doesn't riot, it simmers. This is a story about hidden empires, invisible leadership, coded languages, and the men who refuse to surrender their power, even when the world locked them away into the key into the Rockies. Inside ADX, a gang leader doesn't need to shout. A single letter can move drugs across states. A small gesture during recreation can start a feud. A coded prayer can signal a hit. And silence can be the loudest order of all. This documentary takes you behind the steel doors, past the cameras, into places no visitor sees. Into the world where gang members learn to talk without talking, rule, without seeing, lead without touching. Into a place where a man can be locked down for 23 hours a day and still control men hundreds of miles away. ADX Florence was built to break the strongest. But some men walk into the Supermax already broken, already hardened, already prepared for the darkness. Men who grew up in violence, who survived segregation units, who learned to read the world by tone, silence, and fear. Men who don't need freedom to be dangerous. Inside these halls, power isn't measured in muscles or weapons. It's measured in patience. It's measured in loyalty. It's measured in discipline. And most of all, it's measured in fear. Some gang leaders arrived at ADX thinking their power was over. But inside these cells, isolated and forgotten, they only became smarter, colder, more strategic. They learned how to use their memories as maps, their routines as messages, their enemies as motivation. And as the years passed, a quiet war began, not with fists or weapons, but with control, with influence, with subtle moves that shaped entire groups inside other prisons. Staff tried to stop it. The walls tried to stop it. Technology tried to stop it. But the human mind, the human hunger for power, is something even ADX Florence cannot silence. Because inside America's most secure prison, where every man is supposed to disappear, power still breeds. This is Gangs and Power Inside, the hidden story of the leaders, the codes, the silent wars, and the underground governments that still move inside the most feared prison on earth. And tonight, you will see that inside ADX Florence, no one is truly alone, not even in solitary. The men who entered the dark. They call the transfer to ADX Florence the last ride. A man sits chained in the back of a black transport van, wrists locked, ankles locked, waist locked. No view outside. No sunlight. No idea where he is on the road. He only knows one thing. This is the end of every path. For most inmates, ADX is where their story stops. But for gang leaders, this is where a new one begins. When the van doors open for Miguel El Sombra Rivas, one of the most feared Latino gang leaders on the West Coast, he stepped into a silence so deep it felt alive. No voices. No footsteps. Only the cold wind from the Rocky Mountains cutting through his jumpsuit. He was surrounded by armed guards wearing black masks, holding rifles tight against their chests. They didn't shout. They didn't touch him unless they needed to. Everything here moved like a machine, smooth, quiet, unbreakable. Face forward, one officer said. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was routine, the kind that had been repeated thousands of times. Miguel had ruled entire cell blocks in California. He had ordered hits with a nod, started wars with a sentence. In county jail, even the guards knew his name. But here, he was just another number. They marched him through steel doors that opened like the jaws of a monster. One door closed behind him before the next opened. Layer after layer, cage after cage, until all signs of the outside world disappeared. ADX Florence isn't a prison. It's a system. Every hallway is a tunnel. Every window is a slit. Every sound echoes like it's being watched. Miguel's shoes scraped against the concrete floor as they led him to the intake cage. A nurse checked his blood pressure. A camera scanned his eyes. Every detail was logged, stored, and watched. His past, his crimes, his gang ties, all marked and read on the screen. A lieutenant walked in holding a file 2 inches thick. "You'll be in H unit," he said. 23 hours a day in the cell. 1 hour in a recreation cage. No physical contact with any other inmate. No gang signs. No coded language. No unauthorized mail. Miguel just listened. He had heard the same speech before in other prisons. But ADX was different. The rules weren't suggestions. They were survival. When they finally brought him to his cell, he stepped inside and felt the world shrink. The room was carved from concrete, like it had been made for a statue. No loose items. No corners. No weak points. A steel bed, a steel sink, and a steel toilet, all molded into the wall. Light that never fully turns off. A thick door with 2 small slits, one for food, one for handcuffs. This was the new home of a man who once controlled hundreds. Miguel took a slow breath. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "Let's see what this place really is." Across the tier, another man had arrived that same morning. Malik Iron Wolf Thompson, once the sharpest mind in a violent Midwest gang. Taller than most, with tattoos reaching his jawline, Malik had the kind of presence that made younger inmates stare and older ones step aside. But here his presence meant nothing. His door slammed shut with the same metallic finality. On another tier, locked deep in Echo Block, was Anton Ghostline Varga, an Eastern European enforcer whose reputation traveled like wildfire. His name had been whispered in courtrooms, border stations, and prison yards. But in ADX, whispers die before they reach the air. 3 men, 3 leaders, 3 different worlds. Yet they all came here for one reason. They had too much power in other prisons. Authorities believed ADX would break the lines of communication, destroy gang influence, and silence the leaders who kept violence alive. They thought concrete could control loyalty. They thought isolation could erase memory. But power does not need sunlight. Power does not need movement. Power needs only one thing: a reason to survive. Weeks passed, then months. The silence began to sharpen. Miguel noticed events carry more than air, sometimes a faint scrap of sound. Malik noticed how guards responded 1 second faster on the north corridor than the west. Anton noticed small patterns in the mailroom timing, the recreation scheduling, the legal call rotations. Each man, alone in his cell, began studying the prison as if it were an opponent. Some men break under isolation. Others learn from it. One night, during the rare quiet hours after lockdown, Miguel heard it, a faint tap, too light to be random, too steady to be noise. He froze. Tap, 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 tap. It wasn't coming from his door. It wasn't coming from his vent. It was coming from somewhere deep, somewhere familiar. He leaned closer to the concrete wall, pressing his ear to the cold surface. Tap, 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 tap. A code, a rhythm used in county jail years ago. A signal only gang members knew. In ADX Florence, the place built to stop communication, a message was moving. Miguel closed his eyes, not in fear, in recognition. Someone else was here. Someone who knew the system. Someone who wasn't broken. And if he could hear this message, others could too. A spark had appeared in the darkness. A connection, small but powerful. And in prisons, connections are the beginning of everything. Alliances, orders, power, war. Miguel whispered into the concrete. So you're here too. And far down the tier, faint but certain, the tapping answered back. ADX had brought the leaders in to silence them. Instead, it had placed the most dangerous minds only inches apart. And from that moment, the prison was no longer quiet. It was alive. The codes that never died. The first thing ADX Florence tries to kill is sound. The second is trust. The third is memory. But the men who arrived here, Miguel, Malik, and Anton, were not beginners in the art of silence. They were surgeons of communication, trained long before ADX's walls were even built. Men who learned to survive in places where a single wrong word could end a life. And in ADX, the place designed to strip power away, their memories became their sharpest weapons. The tap that started it all. After Miguel heard the coded tapping through the wall, he spent 3 days listening, not speaking, not responding, just listening. ADX is loud in strange ways. Doors slamming, chains clinking, guards calling out instructions. But beneath that noise is a deeper silence, one that traps even the smallest sound. Miguel had to separate real signals from random echoes. Tap, 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 tap. It came again. A sequence. Miguel recognized the old county jail rhythm. Every tap represented a letter's position in the alphabet. A equals 1 tap. B equals 2 taps. C equals 3. And so on. The message was short, slow, careful. Y. O-U-R-E-N-O-T-L-O-N-E. Miguel felt something he hadn't felt since the day he got sentenced. A spark. Not happiness. Not hope. Purpose. He waited until the guards finished count. Then he replied, tap, 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 I-H-E-A-R-Y-O-U. Across the tier, a man who had been silent for years smiled in the dark. A prison built against language. ADX Florence was designed to stop the exact thing Miguel was doing. Everything, every wall, every vent, every door, was made to kill communication. Cells are angled so inmates can't see each other. Vents are narrow, preventing voice travel. Recreation cages are separated by distance. Mail is scanned, delayed, and monitored. Legal calls are recorded for security reasons. Even shadows barely touch from one cell to another. ADX architects believed they had erased possibility, but they never understood prisoners. They never understood how deeply gangs practice the art of hidden signals. Before ADX existed, these men already talked in folded papers hidden in food trays, cough codes, shoe patterns under doors, mirror reflections, pen taps, book scratches, coded prayers, soap marks, toilet flush rhythms, and the old-school alphabet knock. ADX tried to stop everything, but it was impossible to stop what was already inside their heads, the mind behind the noise. While Miguel listened for patterns, Malik, Iron Wolf, Thompson had already started his own silent investigation. He wasn't listening for taps. He was reading shadows. Every day, Malik watched the guards routine down to the second. Every footstep, every key turn, every mealtime, every shift change. Malik treated ADX like a battlefield map. He noticed Unit B guards moved faster than Unit A guards. The mail cart always arrived 6 minutes after lunch trays. The recreation gate opened exactly 4 seconds after the lock buzz. A particular guard, with a scar on his jaw, lingered too long outside certain cells. And then he noticed something else, something important. Whenever that guard lingered, he paused near the wall 2 doors down from Malik's cell. And that same night, Malik heard faint taps. Someone else was sending messages. And someone else was watching. Malik leaned against the cold wall, whispering to himself. Someone's moving pieces on the board. He didn't know who yet, but he knew the game had begun. The ghost and echo block. While Miguel and Malik were decoding ADX's rhythms, Anton Ghostline, Varga was doing something entirely different. Something colder. Something smarter. Anton was listening not for taps, but for silence. Silence in prisons is never natural. It always means something. Sometimes it means fear. Sometimes it means discipline. Sometimes it means planning. Anton had been locked in Echo Block, the deepest, quietest, harshest unit in the entire prison. The cell doors were thicker. The walls were heavier. Even sound traveled slower. But inside that silence, Anton could feel movement, subtle but real. He could tell when a guard walked with tension in his steps. An inmate was awake even if he made no noise. A lockdown wasn't caused by routine, but by investigation. A search wasn't random, but targeted. A prisoner was being pressured to talk. Anton was a hunter long before he was locked up, and ADX hadn't changed that. One night, he pressed his ear to the floor, the cold concrete pressing into his skin. He could feel faint vibrations, like someone tapping water pipes somewhere far down the block. Only one group used pipes to communicate. Only one gang on Earth trusted steel more than air. Anton whispered, "So, they brought the Brotherhood here too." Now he knew 3 gangs, 1 prison, all their leaders inside these walls. And someone out there, a guard, an inmate, or something bigger, was pushing the lines together. The invisible thread. 3 men, 3 stories, 3 different codes. Miguel's tapping, Malik's routines, Anton's silence. They were not working together. Not yet, but in ADX, power doesn't rise loudly. It rises quietly, through patterns, observation, and patience. The guards thought the prison was calm. The cameras saw nothing unusual. The reports looked clean. The walls stayed in place. But something had returned to ADX. Something the authorities feared more than violence. Gang communication, gang memory, gang leadership. And soon, the 3 men would discover that someone inside ADX had a plan. One that connected all of them without their knowledge. A plan that would test loyalty. A plan that would shift power. A plan that would ignite a silent war inside the Supermax. All it needed was one final spark. And that spark was coming. The hand that pulled the strings. The most dangerous thing inside ADX Florence isn't the gangs. It isn't the leaders. It isn't even the violence that sleeps quietly behind every steel door. The most dangerous thing is an invisible hand. A person who can move without being noticed. A person who understands both sides, the officers and the inmates. A person who sees a prison not as walls, but as a board game. Inside ADX Florence, that person had already begun their work long before Miguel, Malik, and Anton arrived. They just didn't know it yet. The guard with the scar. Malik had been watching a particular guard for weeks. The man with the scar on his jaw. He moved differently from the others. Not scared, not nervous, calculated. He paused outside cells without reason. He wrote notes during meal runs. He checked vents like he was expecting something inside. Every few days, he took a long route around the tier, stopping near Miguel's wall, then Malik's, then disappearing into Echo Block, where Anton was kept. Malik didn't know who the man was, but he knew one thing. Somebody doesn't walk around this prison like that unless he already owns it. And he wasn't wrong. The undelivered letter. One afternoon, during mail pass, a small white envelope slid under Miguel's door. The handwriting wasn't familiar. The name on the return address was fake. The paper smelled faintly of chemicals, like it had been handled too many times. Miguel opened it slowly, carefully unfolding the single sheet. There were no words, just a drawing, a simple line, then another line crossing it, then a third line forming a triangle. Miguel stared at it, his eyes narrowing. It was the old prison sign for triangle leadership. 3 heads, 1 power. Only high-ranking gang members even knew what it meant. And it wasn't a message from his people. Miguel knew every symbol his gang used. This wasn't one of them. Someone else had sent it. Someone who understood prison codes better than most inmates. He studied the backside of the paper. 3 tiny dots pressed into the corner, barely visible unless you tilted the paper in the light. 3 dots. 3 men. Miguel felt his breath tighten. Was this a warning? A signal? A threat? Or worse, was someone trying to pull him into a structure he didn't belong to? ADX wasn't random. Someone was arranging pieces. A meeting in shadows. Down in recreation, Malik entered a small concrete cage for his 1 hour outside. The sky was a small square above him. The air tasted metallic. He walked in slow circles, pretending to exercise, pretending not to care. But he wasn't here for fresh air. On the far side of the yard, in another recreation cage separated by metal fencing and distance, a man he didn't know stepped into view. Middle-aged, strong shoulders, calm eyes, gray hair. He looked like someone who didn't fear anything, not even ADX. The man didn't speak. He didn't wave. Instead, he lifted his hand and traced a shape in the air with his finger. A triangle, the same symbol as Miguel's letter. Malik froze, only for half a second. But the man saw it. Then the stranger turned his back and signaled to the guard. Rec time over. And he was taken away. Malik stood in the cage, heart steady but thoughts racing. Someone was uniting something. Someone was signaling both him and Miguel. Someone who had access to multiple units. Someone who moved like a ghost. The man Anton remembered. Deep in Echo Block Anton Ghost Line, Vargas sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. Unlike most inmates, Anton didn't need noise or letters or signs to understand danger. He felt it in the air, and the air had changed. A guard entered his unit. One Anton had not seen for years. Not since a federal courthouse in New York. Not since a time when Anton still believed he could avoid ADX. The guard walked with quiet confidence, carrying a clipboard. He stopped 2 cells down from Anton and looked inside, nodding at something the inmate said. Then he turned slightly, just enough for Anton to see his face. The scar on his jaw. Anton's mind flashed backward. A courtroom, a hallway, a hand gripping his arm, a whisper, "You'll see me again." Not a threat, a promise. Anton had always known that powerful men move in shadows. This one had returned, not as a guard, but as something else. A bridge between worlds. Anton closed his eyes. The same man watching Miguel. The same man approaching Malik. The same man sending signals through the prison. This was the person connecting everything. Not an inmate, not a gang member. Someone far more dangerous. A man who understood every gang code. A man who could manipulate prison transfers. A man who moved without supervision. Anton whispered a single word to himself. Handler. The real game. Miguel finally responded to the letter. He tapped the message back, quiet but firm. "Who are you?" No reply came that night. Or the next. Or the next. But on the 4th night, a tap came. Tap, 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 tap. IHOLDTHEDOORS. Miguel frowned. What doors? Prison doors? Gang doors? Political doors? No one inside ADX held anything, except maybe one person. The guard with the scar. The hand moves. 3 men. 1 message. 1 influencer, moving them toward the same place. But why? Control? Chaos? A test? An experiment? Miguel's instincts told him something bigger was coming. Malik's instincts told him the map was already drawn. Anton's instincts told him this was not a game. It was a trap. Someone inside ADX was planning a shift in power. Not a riot. Not a war. Something quieter. Something more dangerous. Something designed to rebuild gangs from the inside, under one shadow, under one watcher. And now, all 3 leaders were caught in his web. They didn't choose this connection. It chose them. And soon, the true purpose would reveal itself. Inside the coldest corridors of the Supermax. The Empire in the dark. ADX Florence was designed for one purpose. Isolation. Isolation breaks gangs. Isolation kills communication. Isolation erases influence. But now, the exact thing the prison was built to stop was quietly growing inside its walls. Not because of the inmates, not because of the gangs, but because of the handler, the guard with the scar. He was no ordinary correctional officer. He understood the culture too well. He knew the gang signs, the coded languages, the prison rhythms. He walked the halls like someone who had lived both sides of the bars. And most dangerous of all, He wanted power. Not the kind prisoners chased. The kind rulers chased. The first test. Miguel felt the shift before he understood it. For 3 weeks, his mail changed. No bills. No newsletters. No church pamphlets. No legal forms. Only one envelope. Every 3 days. Each letter carried no words. Only symbols. A triangle. A circle. A line with 2 breaks. 3 dots in a row. Every message was part of the system. One used in old-school prison syndicates long before modern gangs existed. The kind of codes passed down through generations, used by men who controlled entire criminal networks from underground cells. The handler wasn't contacting Miguel only. He was teaching him something, preparing him. Miguel sat on his steel bed, staring at the latest symbol, a diamond with a small gap on the left. His breath tightened. This one meant, choose a path. But what path? What decision was he being pushed toward? And why him? Miguel wasn't the only leader inside ADX. Yet the handler kept picking him for messages. He felt the weight of an invisible crown being placed on his head, and it made him uneasy. Malik's discovery. While Miguel studied symbols, Malik, Iron Wolf, Thompson studied patterns. His recreation cage sessions kept lining up oddly. One day, he was alone in the yard at 6 a.m. Another day, 9:14 a.m. Another day, 12:40 p.m. No pattern, no routine, no logic. But Malik wasn't fooled. He noticed the same thing every time. That same middle-aged inmate, the one who made the triangle sign, always arrived either 30 minutes before or 30 minutes after Malik. Never directly next to him. Never close enough to talk, but close enough to see. Like someone wanted Malik to watch him. Like someone wanted Malik to know. You are part of something, whether you accept it or not. And then came the real clue. During one recreation session, Malik spotted chalk dust on the far wall of his cage. A tiny marking, almost wiped off. A triangle, but this time with a circle inside it. A symbol used in prisons of the Midwest decades ago. A symbol that meant united under pressure. Malik looked up at the small square of sky above him and whispered, "Who's trying to recruit me?" But the answer was already moving in the shadows. Anton's meeting with fear. For a man like Anton Ghostline Varga, fear was not something he felt. Fear was something he measured in others. But on a silent night in Echo Block, he noticed something that chilled even him. A lockdown happened, sudden, unexpected, and heavy. Doors slammed. Boots thundered. Lights cut out for 10 full seconds. Not a usual drill. Not routine. After the lockdown ended, Anton heard something he had never heard before inside ADX. An inmate crying. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just broken. Anton listened carefully. The sobbing wasn't from weakness. It was from knowing something. Something dangerous. Something too big a hold. Anton pressed his ear to the floor. He could hear faint movements. Guards whispering. Something being dragged. Something being sealed off. And then he heard the Scar Guard voice. Calm. Controlled. Cold. You talk, you disappear. You understand? The crying stopped instantly. Anton closed his eyes. The handler had just reminded everyone of the real rules inside ADX. He was not supervising the prison. He was controlling it. The 3 paths collide. For the first time, Miguel, Malik, and Anton, 3 men who had never met, were being pushed toward the same center point. By messages, by symbols, by pressure, by fear. The handler wasn't building a gang. He wasn't sparking violence. He was creating something else. A structure, an empire, an underground network inside the most secure prison in America. Why? Money? Power? Control? Revenge? Or something deeper? Something tied to gangs outside? No one knew yet. But ADX Florence, a place meant to keep the world quiet, was becoming a place where power was growing silently, like a shadow in a closed room, like smoke through cracks in concrete, like a heart beating under armor. Miguel felt the pressure closing in. Malik felt the pattern tightening. Anton felt the danger rising. Something was coming. Something big. Something orchestrated. an activation, a shift, a moment where everything would change inside the Supermax. And when that moment arrived, only one question would matter. Who controls the gangs inside ADX? The inmates, or the man holding the keys? The cracks in command. The walls of ADX Florence are built to hold men still. But power? Power never stays still. By the time the handler symbols, patterns, and silent messages reached all three leaders, something inside ADX had changed. Something invisible, something dangerous, something impossible to see on cameras or hear on radios. It wasn't a riot. It wasn't a gang war. It was pressure building under concrete, like heat under steel. Miguel felt it first, then Malik, then Anton, and with pressure comes cracks. The message that shouldn't exist. One night, Miguel heard a new pattern of taps. Fast, urgent, not from the wall, from the vent above him. ADX vents are built to block voices, but they can't block vibration. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, 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 tap. Miguel translated instantly. DONOTTRUSTHIM. His heartbeat slowed. Not trust who? The handler? Or someone else? He waited. The message came again, slower, like the person was scared. HEUSESMENLIKEYOU. Miguel pressed his palm to the vent, whispering. Who are you? Silence. Then, CONTROLEXCHANGE. Control exchange. A term he hadn't heard since he was a teenager in county jail. A term used for when a hidden hand tries to rearrange leadership inside a gang. Miguel felt the blood drain from his face. Someone inside ADX was using the leaders as chess pieces to restructure the power of all three gangs. But for whose benefit? Definitely not theirs. Malik's first warning. The next morning during recreation, Malik noticed something wrong. The chalk symbol from the previous day had been wiped off the wall, but not in a random way. It had been wiped in a circle pattern. Slow, careful, deliberate. A prison sign meaning. Someone is watching you closely. He scanned the yard from inside his cage. Guards were normal. Cameras were normal. Then he saw him, the handler, standing on the catwalk above, looking down at Malik with cold, analytical eyes. Not angry, not suspicious, just measuring him, like a man checking the weight of a weapon before using it. Malik looked away, pretending not to notice, but he felt the message clearly. You're part of my plan now. Don't fight it. The worst part? He didn't know the plan. Anton and the man who broke. Back in Echo Block, Anton heard footsteps rushing down the tier, fast, uncoordinated, panicked. Two guards dragged an inmate past the cell. Anton saw him for half a second. Pale, sweating, eyes red from crying, hands shaking. Not a weak man. A man built like a fighter, covered in tattoos from neck to shoulder. A man Anton recognized. His name was Toro, a lieutenant in a gang that once rivaled Anton's. Someone who didn't fear anything. But today, he looked like a child being carried to punishment. As the guards pulled him past, Toro whispered a single sentence, not to Anton, not to the guards, just into the air. He knows everything. Anton's blood ran cold. The only man Toro could be talking about was the handler. The guards pushed Toro into a side room and closed the door. And then Anton heard it. A soft thud, a muffled cry, another thud, silence. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Toro was gone. Not to medical, not to another unit. Gone, erased. Anton had seen prison violence. He had ordered violence. But this was different. This was strategic, professional, administrative. The kind of disappearance that only happens when someone has too much information or refuses to join the plan. Anton whispered, he's forcing obedience. And ADX Florence, even with its strongest walls, couldn't hide that truth. The network reveals itself. Later that night, Miguel, Malik, and Anton, in 3 different blocks, unaware of each other's exact actions, all received new signs. Not messages, not warnings. Orders. Miguel found a symbol scratched lightly near his door slot. Malik saw a folded strip of paper under his meal tray. Anton heard a coded series of taps in the pipes. 3 different methods. Same message. 3 symbols arranged in a sequence. Triangle, circle, diamond. Together, they meant, prepare for restructuring. Miguel stared at the marks. Malik's hand tightened around the paper. Anton felt a slow burn rise in his stomach. Restructuring of what? Their gangs? Their alliances? Their roles? Or the entire balance of the criminal world outside? One thing was clear. The handler wasn't guiding them. He wasn't recruiting them. He wasn't threatening them. He was reshaping them. And now, cracks appear in his control. Cracks that could become opportunities. If they stayed silent. If they stayed smart. If they stayed alive. The silent agreement. That night, 3 men in 3 separate cells made the same decision without ever meeting. Miguel whispered to the vent, "I will not be controlled." Malik stared at the ceiling. "I'm nobody's pawn." Anton sat motionless in the dark. If he wants a war, he will get one. 3 leaders who had never spoken, now shared the same enemy. And in a place like ADX Florence, even a silent alliance is enough to spark a storm. Because power doesn't break quietly. It breaks violently. And the handler had pushed too far. The prison was about to learn a truth older than ADX itself. You can cage a man, but you cannot cage the hunger for power. The prison that hears everything. ADX Florence was built to control every sound. But that morning, the prison woke up listening to something new. 3 leaders thinking at the same time. Not together, but aligned. Quietly. Dangerously. Miguel, Malik, Anton. Each one had been pushed by the handler. Each one had been manipulated. Each one now wanted to understand the real game. And inside ADX, when 3 dangerous minds start thinking in the same direction, even the walls begin to feel it. The day the air changed. Miguel woke before the lights came on. ADX lights turn on at 5 a.m. every day, exactly on schedule. But today, they flickered, just for a second, barely noticeable. But in ADX, nothing flickers. Miguel sat up instantly. He listened. The hum of the ventilation system dropped. The air slowed. Something was being adjusted. And then he heard it, not from the walls this time, but from the floor. A vibration. Short, rhythmic, controlled. Not inmate communication. A system reboot. Somebody was accessing control panels. At 5 a.m., before count, before guard shift. Impossible unless the person doing it didn't follow normal schedules. Miguel whispered. He's moving early. The handler was making adjustments, repositioning, preparing something. And the prison was listening. Malik's strange shadow. At the same minute Miguel heard the vibration, Malik noticed a shadow on his door. It was thin, long, and unmoving. Normally, shadows pass quickly as guard perform morning rounds. But this one stayed, silently watching through the tiny window slit. Malik approached slowly. Then he saw it. A piece of thin white paper had been slid between the door and the floor, acting as a reflector, a trick used in prison interrogation rooms. Someone was watching Malik's movements indirectly, studying how he reacted to light. It wasn't a guard. Guards don't use tricks like that. Only 2 groups do. Experienced inmates, undercover operators. Malik leaned close to the door, lowering his voice to a calm whisper. "You watching me or measuring me?" No reply, but the shadow moved. Not backward, but sideways, like the person was leaving a position they were never supposed to be in. Malik watched the feet retreat, silently. He whispered to himself, "They're setting up the board." Anton and the pipe that spoke. Hours later, while Miguel and Malik processed the strange morning, Anton leaned against his wall in echo block, staring at nothing. He wasn't waiting for a message. He was listening for something deeper. Prisons have a heartbeat. Doors, alarms, footsteps, electric currents, cleaning carts, food service. Anyone who has lived in solitary long enough can predict the rhythm. But today, the rhythm was wrong. Too many guards on the tier. Too many pauses. Too many quiet conversations in dark corners. Too much tension. Then he heard it. A faint metallic tremor ran through the pipe system. Short, coded, intentional. Not inmate tapping. Not random noise. A signal from the control center. Anton froze. ADX pipes run through every unit. But control room signals never travel in inmate pipes, unless someone wants them to. He presses ear to the wall. Another tremor. Then another. Each vibration spaced evenly, forming a sequence. Anton translated it slowly. It be EGINSTONIGHT. Tonight, his eyes widened slightly. The handler wasn't waiting. He was activating something. Something big. Something that needed 3 gang leaders awake, alert and positioned. Anton whispered to the concrete. So this is your move. The call that shouldn't have happened. That afternoon, Miguel was called for a legal phone call. Except he had no upcoming hearings. No active lawyer contact. No scheduled communication. Legal calls are highly monitored, highly restricted, and never offered randomly. Miguel followed the escort team, his wrists cuffed, ankles dragging. They brought him into a small legal booth. Glass walls, steel stool, a heavy phone mounted to the wall. A screen blinked. The timer started. Miguel lifted the phone slowly. Silence. Then, a voice he had never heard before, calm and low. You're part of this whether you want it or not. Miguel's veins turned to ice. The voice continued. Tonight, they test your loyalty. Miguel clenched the phone harder. Loyalty to who? The voice chuckled, not loud but deep. To the future. Then the line went dead. The timer froze. The screen turned black. A guard opened the booth door instantly. Call's done. Miguel stared at him. How? It didn't. The guard slammed the door shut before he could finish. That's when Miguel realized. The legal call wasn't recorded, wasn't monitored, wasn't official. It was a private line. Inside, ADX. Controlled by someone with access to everything. Only one person fit that description. The handler. 3 men, 1 trap. That night, just before count, all 3 men, Miguel, Malik, and Anton, noticed the same shift. The guards' routines changed. Security patterns tightened. Movement in the corridors increased. The atmosphere thickened. And then the doors clicked. Not open, not unlocked, recalibrated. A tiny, almost silent sound. The sound of cell locks entering alert mode. The handler was watching all 3, measuring them, testing them. For what? Their obedience? Their resistance? Their fear? No, their usefulness. Because someone who hears everything wants to control everything. And when ADX Florence goes quiet like this, it means one thing. The prison isn't in control anymore. A person is. A person who chose 3 leaders. A person who set the game. A person who would reveal the truth. In Chapter 7, the night everything breaks. The night the walls remembered. Night inside ADX Florence isn't like night anywhere else. There is no darkness. There is no silence. Only a dim, cold glow that keeps every man half awake and every secret exposed. But tonight, the prison felt different. The hallways were too still. The air too sharp. The rhythm too controlled. Tonight was a night the handler had prepared for. Tonight was the night the 3 leaders would finally understand the truth. And the walls of ADX, once built to erase men, were about to remember everything. The lights that never go off. Miguel lay on his steel bed, staring at the ceiling. The lights were dimmed lower than usual. Not off, but almost half power. He knew what that meant. Dimmed lights in ADX are a sign. A message. Someone inside the control room is overriding systems manually. And there was only one person who had been playing with the system all along. The handler. Miguel sat up, muscles tense, waiting. Then he heard it. A soft clink outside his door. Not the heavy clank of an officer checking the lock. Not the buzz of an electronic release. A metal tap. Deliberate. Miguel moved closer to the slit in his door and whispered, "I know you're there." But no answer came. Only silence and the faint sound of someone breathing. watching him, measuring him. Again, the map that never lied. Across the prison, Malik Iron Wolf Thompson stood in his cell, pacing slowly like a predator trapped in a cage. He replayed the day's events in his mind. The darkened lights, the shifted schedules, the silent shadow, the handler's stare from the catwalk, the strange movement of guards, the new tension in the air. It all added up to one thing: a test. The handler wasn't trying to break Miguel or Malik or Anton. He was trying to see who could adapt, who could lead, who could follow orders without fear, and who could be controlled long enough to reshape the power structure of three major gangs. Malik pressed 2 fingers to the concrete wall. He could feel faint movement in the hallway. Boots repositioning, radios clicking, guards changing posts. Whatever was coming would happen soon. The man who never slept. Down in Echo Block, Anton Ghostline, Vargas sat cross-legged on the floor, completely still. He had been listening for hours. Not for taps. Not for vibrations. Not for whispers. For breath. He could hear it. An extra breath in the tier. Someone trying to breathe quietly, slowly, carefully. Someone hiding. Someone who didn't belong there. Anton didn't move. He didn't panic. He didn't show fear. He simply whispered, "You're not an inmate. Step into the light." Silence. Then a small shape appeared in the darkness of the hallway. Not a guard. Not in full uniform. A silhouette wearing black tactical gear. The handler. Anton didn't need to see his face. He could feel the same cold presence he had sensed in the courtroom years ago. The handler spoke softly through the steel. "Tonight, you'll choose who you become." Anton answered without hesitation. "I already chose." The handler chuckled, low and satisfied. "Good. That's what I needed to hear." Anton's blood chilled. The handler wasn't testing fear. He was testing loyalty to power itself. And Anton had just passed a test he didn't want to take. The real plan reveals itself. At exactly 2:13 a.m., ADX Florence shifted. All at once. Lights flickered. Security gates locked into manual mode. Cameras cycled through a black screen for 5 seconds, just long enough for someone to move unseen. In that moment, all 3 leaders heard something impossible. A cell door somewhere in the prison opened. Not theirs. Someone else's. But whose? Why? What was the handler doing? Miguel pressed his face to the door slit. Try and see down the darkened tier. He whispered. Who did he release? Malik froze mid-step, listening. Anton leaned forward, fully alert. A door opening inside ADX is not a mistake. A door opening at 2:13 a.m. is a message. A door opening during a blackout is a declaration. The handler didn't want violence. He didn't want a riot. He wanted a demonstration, a reminder that he controlled. The movement, the locks, the cameras, the men, and the fear inside the prison. And then the footsteps began. Slow, confident, measured. Someone was walking freely inside ADX Florence. Not a guard, not a warden. An inmate, and the handler was escorting him. The reveal. The footsteps stopped in front of Miguel's cell. Miguel stepped back, fists ready. A figure slowly came into view. Then a whisper slipped to the crack under the door. We're more alike than you think. Miguel froze. He knew that voice. It was the inmate who contacted him through the vent taps. The one who warned him. The one who said the handler used men like him. But why was he now walking with the handler? Before Miguel could answer, the handler's shadow darkened the door slit. Miguel, he said calmly, it's time you understood. Miguel's jaw locked. The handler continued. You 3 are the key, but I choose who holds the crown. The footsteps moved again. Malik could hear them in his tier, but couldn't see who walked past. Anton listened to them echo off the deep concrete walls of Echo Block. 3 leaders, 3 gangs, 3 destinies, and one man pulling all the strings. The final message. At 2:40 a.m., just before the lights fully returned, a final sound echoed through ADX Florence. A heavy buzzer. Short, sharp, purposeful. A signal used only in one part of the prison system. Leadership turnover. An old leader out, a new one chosen. Miguel felt it in his chest. Malik felt it in his spine. Anton felt it in his blood. The handler had chosen someone inside the prison. But who? And for what? The light snapped on. The tears went silent. And across ADX Florence, every man felt the shift. The old balance of power had died. A new one had begun. The power that never sleeps. Inside ADX Florence, nothing ends. Not the silence. Not the stories. Not the hunger for power. The men inside these concrete boxes may be locked away from the world, but their choices echo far beyond the steel. Gangs don't die in isolation. Leaders don't fade in darkness. And power always finds a way to breathe. Tonight was only one chapter in the invisible war that lives inside the Supermax. A war waged without guns, without riots, without noise. A war fought in symbols, in shadows, in silence. And the handler? The man who walks through ADX like he owns the air? He is still here, still watching, still waiting for the next move. Because in this place, the place built to break men, nothing is ever fully under control. Not the inmates, not the guards, not even the walls. ADX Florence remembers everything, every whisper, every step, every plan. And the story of gangs and power inside is not over, not even close. Subscribe, like, and comment if you want part 2, because the truth doesn't stay locked away.